everybody. Welcome to the Daring Debates India chapter. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Nabnita Sarkar, your host and moderator for today's event. And I'd like to first welcome the three eminent jury members, the fantastic 12 debaters, and of course, the audience. Well, let me take you back a little. Difficult Dialogues began in 2016 as an annual event to discuss absolute issues of necessity across South Asia. And Daring Debates was the platform given for the youth, university students from all kinds of backgrounds, regions, ethnicities, to add their voice to policy ideation and formation. It's had 5 successful editions and has been conducted around cities and towns in India. But this year, what is extraordinary is that Daring Debates has gone global. And it will give a much broader platform for the youth across the globe to add their voice to the issues that concern us. And it's also, to add to that, another feather in the cap that it's an integral part of the famous international prestigious Global Sustainability Film Awards, which is co-organized by TVE, which is the UK-based TV for Environment, and Difficult Dialogues. And the final event will take place from the 16th to the 20th of November this year. And before we go forward, 3 country finals have happened, namely Bangladesh, Nepal, and Africa. Today's the turn for India. And now I'd like to ask Serena Narula, who's the founder of GSFA TV and Difficult Dialogues, to say a few words and wish the debaters a great good luck. Over to you, Serena.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you all are. It's really an honor to be part of this whole event. And to all of you debaters, I think you've already won. The fact that you are here and you are speaking at such a big forum, it's a great thing to do because it's very difficult to speak in public. So the very fact you all are here, let me congratulate you and say, this is wonderful that you are debating. That's the first step. And it doesn't matter who wins or who loses in the end. That's always up to the judges. And sometimes it's right or wrong or whatever. But I feel that the very fact you are here, you're winners. And just to let you all know that the reason we started Daring Debates was simply to get your voices in, but your job doesn't finish here. You just don't debate and go home. You actually think about the environment. And I want you all to seriously see what you can do in your area for the environment, because unless each individual now starts thinking about the environment, nothing is going to happen. We cannot depend on governments. We cannot depend on ideas. We cannot depend on movements. We cannot depend on anything. We can only depend on ourselves. So all of us, please go back to your place and think, what is the one thing you can do to change the narrative of the environment, what's happening today? And that's all the ask of you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Nabnita, for doing this. And thank you to the jury members. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena. Now let me introduce the jury members one by one. And after each introduction, if that jury member would like to speak to the debaters as to what they expect from them, then they're most welcome to do that. First, I go with Deepa Sahi. She's an Indian actor and producer who shot to fame with her role in the 1993 Maya Memsab. And we'll never forget that Deepa Sahi. She became a producer the same year and has produced several films since then. She made her debut as a director in the 2011 film Tere Mere Fere. Now, along with Ketan Mehta, she is also the co-founder of the animation company called Cosmos Maya. Deepa, would you like to speak to the debaters? Over to you, Deepa. Are you muted? You're muted.
Yeah. Hi. Hello, everyone. First of all, of course, I have to thank Serena because somebody had once said that the most precious thing you can give to anyone on this earth is time. because that is the perishable commodity which no amount of money can buy. And Serena gives her time to the most amazing causes, which she could easily be doing other things, but she has picked up these sensational, really fiery issues which need so much focus. That Serena, fantastic. And now to the debaters, why this is especially important for me in India, because we all know that India, um, more than 65% of India is under 35. That means they have the majority and the power to do things. So when the youth get involved, then we have hope that things will get activated. So all the best to you, and I hope you come up with really practical ideas and not just theoretical ones. Over to you.
Thank you, Deepa. Now let me introduce Sudhir Mishra. I don't think he needs much introduction because he's one of the leading environment lawyers in India with vast experience in representing clients on both the corporate and litigation sides. He is also the founder of Trust Legal, a leading environment, healthcare, media, and broadcasting law firm. And of course, who doesn't know him for being a crusader against the air pollution menace in Delhi? Mr. Sudhir Mishra, would you like to say what you'd expect from the debaters?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Sunina, for trusting in me and bringing me here. It's a great privilege to be with Deepa ji in this program. We have been watching her when we were in college. So it's always a pleasure to be in such company. Ishita, I'll tell you something. I came to Delhi and Deshbandhu was the kind enough college to give me admission. So I have fond memories of my Deshbandhu days. My wife is from Lady Shri Ram College, so it's more a family thing for me. And I can see a lot of people from both the colleges. But one thing which I want to say is very recently, I've also got a door tenancy in number 5 United Kingdom Chamber, and maybe perhaps the 6th lawyer in this country in last 50 years to get that door tenancy, which paves the way for my becoming a Queen's Counsel in London. I'll tell you, especially for people who think that college or a school really makes you, I totally trust in that medium. I totally trust in the youth. Before 1989, when I came to Delhi University, I was not even able to speak one line in Hindi, forget about English. And I had absolutely rural education. And when I got admission in Deshbandhu College in History Honors, I was told time and again to switch over to some other subject because I was not able to read and write properly. So I tell you that institution like Delhi University, institution like Difficult Dialogue, institution like where you alternative mirror institutions which we are creating in this kind of formats will shape you for a future which you can't even dream of. With this observation, I will also request all of you that come out on the video, put yourself on mute, show yourself, feel the vibe, get connected. That will give you more pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhir Mishra. Now let me introduce the third jury member, Vishal Pendekar. I believe there's been a power outage with him, but let me introduce him. He's a science writer and he mostly concentrates on the environment, but that's not the only thing he does. He enjoys writing about food and pop culture. And above that, he's a naturalist and has worked across several national parks in central India and the Himalayan region of Terai. But unfortunately, right now, I think he's trying to get reconnected. Oh, he's back, I believe. Are you back, Vishal?
Yes, I'm back.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
So if you want to say something to the debaters, what you expect of them, please go ahead.
So I think I wouldn't take too much time. We've already sort of into the what I'll just say quickly is I think this is a very pertinent topic that is going to plague our planet more than the current pandemic. I think, like Sudhir Mishra ji said, the more youth and the next generation of thinkers and policymakers get involved, the more worthwhile it would be, not only for individually but also as a human race. I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, this year's India chapter of Daring Debates is hosted in partnership with the Lloyd Law College, Indira Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute, and the outreach partner is Law Octopus. Various institutes and universities from Delhi, Uttarakhand, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Punjab, Jharkhand, Puducherry, Karnataka, Kerala have all participated in the preliminary rounds. But now it's time for the 12 finalists. And the debating motion for today is democratic politics is inadequate to address climate change. But before we go into the debates, I would like to make the debaters, the jury members, and the audience aware of the rules of the debate. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak, to make their proposition and their arguments. At the end of 1.5 minutes, there'll be a warning bell, and the final bell will be at 2 minutes. After that, if the speaker hasn't finished, he will be given about 7 to 10 seconds to wrap up, following which he or she will be automatically muted. Then the jury member, one jury member, will ask that speaker a question, and again the speaker will be given 1 minute to answer the jury member's question. And after the 1 minute, the warning bell will be sounded, which will be the final bell. But to wrap up, you'll be given another 5 or 6 or 10 seconds, and then automatically muted. And let me tell you, the marking will be dependent exactly on the 2 minute argument that you place and on the 1 minute answer. So I hope you've all got that very clear. And should we dive straight into it now with the first speaker, Ishita Singh from Deshbandhu College, Delhi, who will speak for the motion, and the jury member who's going to ask the question of her is Deepa Sahi. Ishita, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, am I audible clearly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so do I need to give my introduction again, or should I start directly with my speech?
Just start with your speech. We've told the judges where you're from, so don't worry. You're frozen, Ishita.
Today? Sorry?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, sorry. Over again. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I'm in love with my future, but scared of the things it might become. Today, I'll talk to you about 3 main things: the why, the how, and what else. Beginning with, one of the major and fundamental fallacies of democratic politics is the short-sightedness of democratic leaders. 2 points to this. Firstly, the priority of elections. Electoral cycles of 5 years are so short that they mainly focus the policy decisions on short-term political gains to satisfy the median voters. It's politically risky for the leaders of developing democracies to implement hardline long-term policy changes on an electorate whose votes they depend on in order to tackle a problem whose impacts will only be felt by the future generations. Secondly, the economic growth for sustainable living problem. There are large-scale lifestyle changes required to tackle climate change, and this goes against the short-term interest of people. The rich aspire to these unsustainable luxuries, and the poor who aspire to these luxuries must be denied them due to no fault of their own. This clash leads to inadequate and tokenistic decisions made by the democratic governments. Take, for instance, achieving the Paris Agreement goals and making India a $5 trillion economy by 2024 can't ever happen in the same paradigm when more than half of our GDP depends on coal and fossil fuels. Additionally, let's talk about how, despite the pluralistic nature of democracies, strong corporate interest groups can gain high influence over political decision making, compelling politicians to fulfill their short-term interests at the cost of long-term benefits. For example, the 2020 EIA draft that does more harm than good. Also, letting the ecologically exploitative actions of Adani Group and LG Polymers go unnoticed is just few of the many, many blunders that democratic politics has done. Lastly, addressing the what else or the solutions. We don't necessarily need to opt out of democratic structures, simply separating the mainstream governments from an autonomous and strong climatic body is enough. Making them not answerable and at the mercy of particular political parties when enables this body to work solely for long-term politics. I believe this is what India needs, and I believe this is what the world needs. Thank you. Very, very proud to propose.
Okay. Deepa, it's for you to ask the question now. Deepa, please unmute yourself.
Ishita, I agree with a lot of things you said, and I'm really glad you brought them out. But I do think that democracy is the only way. because at least we have the right to question, and we have social media to bring pressure and other such things. But I want you to think positively that within democracy, what are the 3 things that you would do as a citizen to make the government more answerable and rise beyond electoral, priorities?
Okay, ma'am, I'm starting my answer time. So firstly, being a new voter, I'll go ahead and look for the agendas of the political parties that are in the election arena, and I'll vote for the parties, and I'll personally and convince my friends and families to vote for the parties that have at least some marginal benefits that help the environment in the first place. And I'll also rally the people in my college and my friends. I'll create a dialogue through the debating society that I'm in to help people understand what actually we need to improve the environment, specifically in India, because we are talking about India and we live in India in the first place. So
Can't hear her.
Your audio is gone.
dialogue and discourse really platform thing that I currently have way by making making drafts, etc., and voting platforms for people. That is how I think I personally can give to my country and to save the environment.
I'm sorry, I lost out half her answer because of the internet problems.
Okay, so
Can she give a gist again?
Give her a few seconds. Yeah, let
Yeah.
her give her 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Ishita, your
last
voice
part we lost because your
the
voice
last
went.
bit, you can just go through it again.
okay. So I'm starting.
No, after
want me
you
to
would tell
repeat
your
last-
friends to vote for people who have
yeah.
commitment.
Okay, so being a student, the protests, the social media woke protests are the only avenues that I have, that the avenues that I can go ahead and exert my agency in. So by making drafts, by making voting platforms for people like that, for working with ecological NGOs and people that are actively working for environment upliftment, that's what I can personally do to help my country and to improve the environment of the country that I currently live in, and which will later affect my children and my future generations, because this is the time to act. If we don't act now, there's not going to be a world left for us to enjoy.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you, Ishita. The second speaker is K.S. Yadushree from the Sacred Heart College, Thevara, Ernakulam, Kerala. She'll be speaking against the motion, and the jury member will be Sudhir Mishra, who will ask her a question. Over to you, Yadushree.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, and visible.
Respected panel of judges, today I'll be speaking against the motion. So, on looking back, history has saved evidences of the rupture between an undemocratic system and environment conservation. Commercialization of forest in British India destroyed large wildlife resources where tribal communities were left out. During 1850s, in Madras Presidency alone, 35,000 trees were cut annually to lay sleepers for the railways. So we need to understand that the diversification of nature is best shielded by the communities, and this cultural integration with nature is only possible in a democracy. In India, over 1,400 sacred groves are protected in the regions of Maharashtra, Western Ghats, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. Various tribal communities across Himalayas regulate overgrazing through cultural farming methods. Bujani, a sacred forest located in Johar Valley, is the only refuge for the endangered species of musk deer. Even if this freedom is misused, we have the security of laws framed by our constitution. The National Green Tribunal Act 2010, the Environment Protection Act 1986, the Air Prevention and Pollution Control Act 1981 are all cautious steps towards environment conservation. Again, adhering to the principle of equality in a democracy, people have the right to speech to demand for a clean environment, and this is reflected in numerous movements that happened recently in the country, such as Save the Impact K movement, Climate Action Strike, and at the international level, the Green New Deal resolution by Democrats of US. Apart from this, in 2020 budget, Government of India proposed to set up Indian Institute of Cultural Heritage and Conservation, and this can highlight various tribal communities and their cultural activities can be scientifically scrutinized. So we need this collaboration because we live in the era of globalization, where most of the governments across the world are driven by the goals of money and power, where even the oxygen to sustain life can also be marketized. So in the tug of war between the rich and the rich, the voice of the common man would fade out, and thus we need a democratic system to collaborate and work together to make this planet hospitable for generations to come. Thank you.
I'll request Sudipji to please ask the question.
KS, I'll ask you, you feel that the democratic policies are adequate. That's what you are saying. So broadly, I would say, what makes you believe? Give me one, two, three reasons. That what are the three reasons which you make you believe that as a country we are responding well to climate change?
Yes,
Just
sir.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you for the question, sir. So first of all, I would like to point out the India and talk about the EIA draft. When it was open to so many criticism, we were given the opportunity to frame online petitions and respond against the government because EIA draft was violating some of the basic democratic principles. And second, I would point out to US about the Green New Deal resolution put forward by the Democrats of US to reduce the amount of fossil fuels used in the country. And third, I will put forward about collaborating the cultural the tradition and culture of the various communities with the government so that the government can bring out best solution and provide a scientific approach to work together and create an impact in environment that can positively affect large generations. So what I believe is when the government is wrong, the democracy give the people the opportunity to correct the government and point the right goals the government should focus. Thank you, sir.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you. The third speaker is Sazia Godiwala from the Praveen Gandhi College of Law, Mumbai, and she'll be speaking for the motion. And Vishal, you'll be the jury member to ask her the question once she's finished. Over to you, Sazia.
Am I audible?
Yes.
I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. Goramora Island sinking in the Sundarban Delta. Kerala hit by the worst flood in the century. India becomes the third largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. Chennai's soil and Delhi's air contaminated by PCB. These seemingly endless and alarming environmental issues has left the country counting the cost of climate change. The question we ask after every disaster is, could it have been avoided? And when government justify environmental crisis and sacrifice for development, it is not answering whose development at whose cost. Thus, democratic politics have mutated into deceptive politics as government policies are largely dependent upon lobbying, vote bank tactics, fulfilling forward agendas while continuing to silence the voice of the masses. The past governments have floundered and mired in multiple scams like the coal allocation scam, the iron ore and sand mining scam, and the oil scam. Whereas, on the other hand, the current government's approval to mining in the Bhabur area, which is the crucial location to groundwater recharge, auctioning of coal mines in the sensitive forest areas where Adivasis live, derailing legislation due to the lobbying by plastic industries, rampant felling of trees for industrial sectors, and criminalizing ecological dissent reveal the diabolical temperament of democratic politics. Moreover, prima facie, the government promises action against climate change, but end up diluting all the laws, policies, and regulations, which again merely remain in black and white. Environmental jurisprudence is also threatened by the constant power struggle between the judiciary and the government. Thus, alternatives to democratic politics is constituting a second generation of environmental reforms which empower a gridlock of strong independent technocratic bodies, effective regulation, review mechanisms, and a staunch judiciary that stands against climate crisis.
Vishal, would you like me to ask the question?
That's right. Okay. Sazia, that's well said. I just wanted to ask you then, so it's not democracy, what would you rather have?
I am not condemning or berating or chastising democracy as a concept. I am saying that democratic politics have showed themselves and proved themselves to be inadequate to address climate change policies. Over the course of years, we have seen that democracy has weakened multilateral effort. Their promises are merely a lip service to the society, and whereas environmental policies only stay in the agendas of political parties. Thus, democracy as a concept is A1. But when it comes to democratic politics and democracy acting against climate change, I feel that they have failed us. So I vouch for a strong judiciary and independent technocratic bodies that will take action against climate change and save the country, not only of the historical impacts, but the future coming impacts of climate crisis.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ishani Mukherjee from Jesus and Mary College in Delhi, and she'll be speaking against the motion, and the jury member will be Deepa Sahi, who will ask her a question after she finishes. Over to you, Ishani.
Hi, everyone. I'll begin in just a second. I time myself. 3, 2, 1. Most of the harms cited by my opponents are not exclusive to democratic politics. Politicians not implementing their policies, failure to regard climate change as an urgent problem are things that can happen even in a communist society. Therefore, to prove that democratic politics is not inadequate, I'll explain why it's the only system that allows us to question these flaws. 3 major reasons. Firstly, it is democratic politics that allows for us to have inclusivity in climate activism rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. For example, in the reason that the Save Array movement discourse could accommodate so many interests is because it not only focused on climate change, but also incorporated the impact on Adivasi communities. Secondly, when environmental policies tilt in favor of the elite and the powerful, it is democratic politics that allows us to ask for accountability. In 2012, when 50 farmers in Madhya Pradesh protested in a Jal Satyagrah against the construction of a dam, it led to the Madhya Pradesh government becoming answerable. In the Narmada Bachao Andolan, the fact that various lawyers and activists continued to protest and write writ petitions put pressure on the legal system and made the international sphere also incorporated in the movement. Which brings me to my final question. The idea is that change comes when there is engagement and when there is realization of the problem. Democratic politics is not just limited to electoral politics. It allows for us to have a scope to engage, to debate, to critique governmental policies. And that is its value. Because in that space, it makes people feel a part of the movement. And for those reasons, democratic politics is in no way inadequate to address climate change. Thank you.
Deepa, you could ask your question, please.
Ishani, while I agree with you that democracy is the way to be, I want to ask you that as far as climate change is concerned, it is really not a country issue at all, only. For example, the Amazon burning, which everybody knows provides, is called the lungs of the earth. And with Mr. Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement, what do you think democracy can do to bring this pressure on the international community? Because unless the international community is answerable, one country alone can do nothing, democratic or undemocratic. So what is your suggestion? How are you going to, how do you think democracy is going to fight the world economics and make one of the largest democracies answerable?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. I think, so the way that I look at it is that I want to talk a little more about the Narmada Bachao Andolan, because as a student of sociology, I've learned about how the reason that it has been attributed in some way as a successful movement is because on the international sphere, at least it brought conversation and a regulation of the international norms related to climate change. So I think when Trump pulls out of the Paris Agreement, there is a certain international norm, like an international community that does critique it. And I think that's very evident in the 21st century. We have social media, we have Instagram posts with 10 slides talking about the impact of Trump pulling out of it. And I think even that conversation that is enabled because of democratic politics and how it enables a free flow of information, I think that conversation itself has value because at least the population is getting sensitized. And I think sensitization of populations is the first step to bring any tangible policy changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ishani. The next speaker is Gaurang Narayan, Indira Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute, Puducherry. He'll be speaking for the motion, and Sudhir Mishra will be asking him the question once he's done. Over to you, Gaurang.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, yes.
So I'll start 3, 2, 1. Good evening. To begin with, I'd like to state that the present day laws and policies pertaining to environment are inefficient to tackle climate change. We need better policies. The reason being there's a lack of update, and second, there's a paucity of issue or challenge specific law. So we need better policy. The biggest issue with the democratic government is they snugly remove this term called democracy from the government, and they never come up with good policies. But let's say by chance they come up with a good policy, from policy ideation to policy structuring to policy sanctioning and to policy implementation, they're going to be subjected to multiple hierarchical strata, and within the strata, they're going to be subjected to red tapeism. Also, there's always an element of trade-off between economic growth and environmental protection. Example, the government of Nepal had banned the use of e-bikes in order to accelerate the growth of automobile industry. Even in India, we had to jeopardize the RA farms considered to be the respiratory tree of Mumbai for the sake of metro. Also, there are loopholes present inherently within any legal system. United States had come up with carbon emission taxes and carbon claims. In order to evade paying such taxes, Bill Gates' company started buying these credits from other companies, but actually did nothing to reduce the emission. Also, on a broader picture, if you look at the present day floods, Bhopal gas tragedy, the Lucknow gas tragedy, all of which are pointers towards disaster unpreparedness, which again is an issue of poor bureaucracy and administration and are threat to climate change because of global warming. Also, it's a vicious cycle, all of which starts from our basic ignorance. And if you look and trace the roots of ignorance, they will lead on to illiteracy, poverty, and overpopulation, which are reasons and pitfalls again of the government. Now, having spoken about the policies, I'd like to come forward with 3 important solutions. First, we have to engage young minds with novelty. How many of us know about Ridhima Pandey? Unfortunately, just being a 12-year-old child, she's not given a chance to vote in a democracy. Second, we have to join hands with tribal people like it happened in Gavi and Araku Valley, as well preserving the ecosystem and giving them job opportunity. Last but not the least, charity begins at home. It is we who have to avoid doing anything that's going to endanger the environment. With this, I rest my case. Thank you.
Now you can ask your question, Sudhir.
Gaurang, I really like your points, whatever you said, but the problem is I'm of the firm believer, and I'm telling you, even despite being a judge, that the laws are perfect and their implementation is the issue in our country. In fact, we have more laws than most of the countries. We claim to have a Department of Climate Change in last 5-6 years. Actual issue is the political will. So if we are confusing between democracy and political will, then there is an issue. What I like to ask you, you said in your address that youth is an answer. RA was a perfect example because there was the youth mobilization and they went right up to Supreme Court. I will ask you why we are not having more postcard petitions the way they were happening in 80s and 90s. Why air pollution is not a citizens issue and only a youth, your age group and other people will do it. So what are the 3 things you will personally do to motivate the youth that forget the laws, forget the democracy, as a citizen of this society who has to breathe this foul air? Because when I file a petition in Delhi High Court, which I'm fighting for the clean air, I feel that we hardly see schools and colleges actually getting engaged. So what are the 3 things you will do to change the narrative?
Can I answer now?
Yeah.
Sir, first and foremost is to form an effective dialogue.
What will you do?
That's
3 things.
3 things primarily.
Tell me what are your 3 things?
First is to form an effective dialogue when I'm speaking with people, interacting with people. Interaction is the key. Thereby, I'm going to provide them with information as well, try and evade all the possible negativity that they have towards coming up forward. Second, if there is within my scope, I would like to create a platform where people can come forward and share their views specifically with regards to environment. Last but not the least, I will still try to motivate people to do whatever they could do. I had a recent trip to Ladakh. What happened was I was seeing plastics. People can avoid throwing plastics. You can resort to using public transport rather than going for private transport. So these are the 3 important things: motivation, forming a dialogue, and creating a platform for people. So these 3 things would be my personal.
Okay. So let's do a little more meaningful thing. We have all these big e-platforms
I'm
informing
sorry,
us.
sir. I don't know if it's an internet issue with my side or yours. It's stuck for me. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Now I'm able to hear you. Yes, sir.
Just 1 second. I have to make this observation. Since you are talking very sensibly about many things, we have this e-platform informing the whole country that we should take out our pockets, give the wallets, and buy everything in the sale which has been announced by all the major ones. Will you do something? Ask your friends that when they send a laptop or a mobile phone wrapped in five stages of covering with plastics, and we gleefully accept them in our homes. So we need to write to these platforms. As youth, write to these platforms, sir, okay, make money out of this country, make money out of e-platform, but please use less plastic, less layering when you send the stuff to our home. That's one of the ideas which I wanted to tell you, because you said that I'll create a platform.
I'll take this, sir. I'll definitely take this. Thank you so much, sir.
Wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The next speaker is Priyanshi Bharadwaj from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, Delhi, and she will be speaking against the motion, and Rochelle would be the jury member asking her a question once she's done.
All
Over
right.
to Priyanshi.
Yeah, am I audible right now?
Yes.
Am I visible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'll be starting. I'm Priyanshi Bharadwaj. I'm speaking against the motion. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. An essential thing that democratic politics provides us with is the freedom of holding a dialectic and to begin public discourses that are extremely important for any sort of action to come into place. These freedoms become even more pertinent when you look at the South Asian society such as India, where governance requires keeping the interests of the diverse communities as a priority.
Be a little slow. Priyanshi, can you just little bit slow? We will not be able to understand. Just be a little slow. It will be
sure. When we look at the environmental movements, a central one is the Chipko movement, which did not essentially come out of the deprivation of forest resources, but rather a fear of rapid ecological destabilization. This fear of certain communities has to be central in any kind of policy making, and democratic politics gives people the opportunity to see the acceptance, the validation, and the action that takes into consideration the basics of human emotion. The mere fact that democratic politics takes place at 3 different levels, the center, the state, and the local, enables this very diversity to be represented at every level and public discourses to take place at every level as well. A movement for climate action would not have to start off as a nationwide one, but rather a local movement can change into a nationwide one, and that will be enabled with the help of the 4th pillar of democracy, that is the media. The media informs the people. The media creates the adequate citizen. The media creates the informed citizen, right? But here's where I concede when I say that we also need to realize the necessity of keeping media separate from not only popular propaganda and corporates, but also from a public demand-based approach to the news. I do believe that democratic politics is adequate for addressing climate change, but an adequately informed citizen is what strengthens the same. What needs to reform, however, is long-term policies that need to come into the mixture. The inclusion of care in political discourses becomes a necessity, along with the need for a much more intersectional approach. This intersectional approach democratic politics provides, because democracy at its core has been a form of government that constantly changes, adapts, and strives to become better. Democratic politics enables the system of adaptation, this system of change, and the system of striving. Thank you.
Rochelle.
Yeah. Right, Priyanshi, I think you are clear about the democratic processes, but I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about the specific topic in question of how does it help climate change, or if you could give some examples where you see this happen.
All right. I believe that democratic politics helps in climate change essentially because at the end of the day, any form of government comes from the people, right? And any kind of people, and it's the people at the end of the day who become leaders, who become the supporters of leaders, who form any sort of a system or any sort of a state. When we look at climate change, we need to realize that these very people are the ones that need to be informed, which happens through a democracy, because you have 7 billion people on earth, right? These 7 billion people are the ones that are going to create a state, and this state should be democracy, because when you look at the alternatives, when you look at the regimes, such as the most popular one in the climate change discourse is the authoritarian regime that should come out of science, right? That kind of a regime, as much of a sense it makes in paper, when you realize that you have different societies that exist, you have different cultures that exist, you have certain beliefs that exist, and you need to keep all of these in mind. You cannot have just scientists leading any kind of a country, right? Because at the end of the day, we do not understand technology as well as we think we do, because technology is one singular thing that has been central to the entire discourse of, say, development, to the entire discourse of even the pollution that's going on right now. This technology
Right, I
cannot.
think Priyachi has made your point. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Priyanshi. Now I'll invite Kavan Malani from the Madras Christian College, Chennai, and she'll be speaking for and
Good evening, esteemed jury members. I am Kavin Malani and I'm a student of economics from Madras Christian College. And today I'm going to be speaking for the motion, democratic politics is inadequate to address the problem of climate change. Now, climate change is a complex challenge and is probably the largest collective action problem in human history. And although democratic politics have given us a lot to be grateful for, I strongly believe that they're inadequate to address the problem of climate change owing to the following reasons. The first reason is that leaders in a democracy tend to be short-sighted. They tend to focus on short-term goals as opposed to long-term goals, and projects such as climate change mitigation tend to take a backseat. The second reason is that business interests have a huge role in political decision-making in democracies. And these business interests align themselves with capitalistic principles, and they contribute to environmental depletion and also endanger the lives and livelihoods of indigenous communities who have protected and nurtured the environment for centuries together. For instance, Ratan Tata built the Kalinganagar Tata steel plant on the bodies of dead tribal people who were massacred in police firing, and democratic politics placed absolutely no checks on him. The third reason is that democracies give primacy to individual freedom as opposed to collectivism. As a result, collective welfare tends to take a backseat and environmental policies are not focused upon. Citizens in a democracy often lack the scientific literacy that is required to advocate for climate change. And in an instance to appease them, leaders in a democracy tend to cater to their immediate needs, and policies pertaining to the environment are not implemented. So much so that recently in Delhi, a 9-year-old climate activist was detained by the police. So given all these arguments, in my opinion, a benign ecological autocracy that suspends individual rights to take drastic action with regards to climate change is a probable solution. Thank you.
Deepa, please ask your question.
Yeah, Kevin, I want to focus and bring your attention to a very practical problem, because what you said is highly theoretical. Because there are a lot of abuses possible with the blanket statement that you made. For example, recently we've all been hearing about the crop burning, which majorly contributes also to the pollution that Sudhirji is talking of, if I'm right, with my little knowledge. So this like 35 million tons of this waste is burnt annually. Now, since you are also a student of economics, and this is actually also an economic problem, because how do you motivate a farmer through some autocratic rule or whatever movement that you're talking of to who's already poor? How do you solve this problem? Because he has to, the quickest solution for him is to just burn it. So he has to, deal with it, store it, reuse it, harvest it, whatever he has to do to not burn it. What is your solution for that very complex economic problem, which needs to stop?
Thank you for your question. So in my opinion, to tackle this problem, the implementation has to be strengthened, and farmer needs to be apprised of alternate measures that can be adopted instead of crop burning, and democratic leaders need to build a bridge between the farmers and the leaders in order to go about this problem.
No, you have to give me a practical solution. Just informing him is not enough. He has to be empowered and have the resources and the time and the money to do this, what needs to be done. So what is your solution there?
I think incentives have to be given to the farmers in order to make them adopt new things. And in my opinion, people who are engaged in the development sector have to evolve measures in order to go about this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Yash Gupta, who's speaking against the motion from the Armed Forces Medical College, Pune. And Sudhir Mishra will be the jury member who will ask the question after Yash Gupta is done. Over to you, Yash.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes. Is your video on?
I am medical cadet. Yes, ma'am. Video is on.
Can't see you on the video. It's just a still.
Ma'am. I think there's a little lag.
Okay. Okay, now you're there.
Should I begin? If
Yes.
My voice is clear?
Please. Yeah.
I am medical cadet Yash Gupta, and my case today is simple. I'd like to point out that if you don't use a car for the rest of your life, you'll face a plethora of difficulties without making any difference. But when the Delhi government decided to switch its public transport from diesel to CNG and introduce robust in the city, an impact, and it made it efficiently. Democratic politics is indispensable for realizing the goal of environmental justice, which believes that everyone should get the same degree of protection against environmental hazards. The wider outreach a government can ensure with the National Forest Policy, etc., is especially important in a country like ours, where the urgency of the climate crisis needs to be conveyed to all strata of society, including the Adivasis and the urban poor. We cannot risk having an elitist mainstream climate movement when it is the lower class that will be disproportionately impacted, as they have fewer resources to cope, while the billionaires responsible for this crisis will survive at the cost of the common man, you and me. After all, the doors to Elon Musk's Mars colony aren't open to us. If there are three platforms for fighting climate change: individuals, corporations, and government. Individuals alone don't have the power to save the planet, and corporations cannot be trusted with this responsibility because their duty lies with their shareholders. Yes, every major corporation in the world has promised reforms, yet only 20 firms are responsible for a third of all greenhouse gas emissions. This is where democratic politics steps in. It is the platform at which we can address the shortcomings of the former two. For the individuals it represents, small steps by the government, school curriculum including an emphasis on climate change, and encouraging use of public transport can create far-reaching ripples of change through knowledge and action. For those already passionate to fight, democratic politics gives a voice to speak on the national and international level through their elected leaders. For the selfish industries that trifle with environmental liability, implementing a strict carbon tax and shifting focus to renewable sources of energy will pave the way for making sustainable development the new norm. Climate change is a crisis that threatens our very existence. Having a global democratic plan that deals fairly with its effects for generations to come has become non-negotiable.
Yeah, I'll be asking. Yeah. Yash, you are a medical student, right?
Yes, sir.
Good. So Deepaji was talking about the agriculture waste burning, and I'm fighting a petition in Delhi High Court for 5 years. And you will not believe me that every year, the moment when the air actually becomes very bad, it becomes unbearable, then all the state governments start blaming each other. So I run from pillar to post to hospitals to IMA, and I asked doctors, and I have gone to the doctors' body and have said to them that, like many other countries, why don't you write on your prescription that pollution is the reason for the lung infection? As a medical student, do you think we can go in that direction where doctors and doctors' body will recognize, you already admit that because of pollution, how many thousands of people die in India every year? You think it's feasible for you to write on the prescription that pollution is the reason why a person's lung capacity has suffered?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question, sir. I would like to comment on this. You are absolutely right, sir. We need to start recognizing how detrimental it is, air pollution is to us. We are raising a diseased generation. There are children today that have asthma, that wouldn't have had asthma 20 years back. There is no family history of asthma in their family. So we need to start recognizing not only air pollution, but also we need to start recognizing the effects pesticides can have on the soil, on the farmers that use them. There are cases of blindness that are caused by pesticides. And it is only through information that we can empower the people. So I'm very happy to inform you that I read these things not in my medical course, but in my 11th and 12th standard. These topics, ecology, has been included in our state board textbooks. And I remember these from 2 years back because I have had exams on these very same topics. So I feel that if the government continues providing an emphasis on education and emphasis on climate change in their education, we can actually move a step forward.
Brilliantly answered. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Very well answered.
Thank you. Next speaker is Zainab Shamsi from Jesus and Mary College, Delhi, who will be speaking for the motion. And Rochelle is the jury member who will ask the question once she's done. Over to you, Zainab.
Hi. So I'll let you know when I begin my speech.
Yeah, you're visible and audible.
Great. So I'll start now. But generally, democracy may seem like an ideal system for tackling climate change. It enables cooperation and the critical assessment of policy because of the freedom to elect our representatives. The problem is that this process requires time, a luxury we do not have given the urgency of the climate change issue. The climate crisis is an issue that requires long-term thinking across generations. Yet electoral democracy is geared towards addressing immediate grievances. Politicians don't look beyond short-term electoral cycles or short-term political gains. This discourages the adoption of far-sighted policies because voters are swayed by short-term policies that solve their urgent needs or problems. Yes, democracies allow dissent, protest, and questioning, but these movements are sporadic, rare, and mobilization at the global level will take years. Moreover, in democracies, a new election can completely overturn policies that had only been implemented a few years ago. Any significant political action against climate change is unstable because the next elected government could dissolve all progress. For example, the recently amended Environment Impact Assessment. Moving on, democracy is only representative of the majoritarian privileged voice. These people are least affected by environmental degradation. For example, tribal Adivasi communities face displacement because of natural disasters, but the larger urban middle class vote does not seem to care or see it as a critical issue. What's also very important to understand is that the climate crisis is accelerated and created by capitalism. Note that democracy also currently functions within that socio-economic framework within the capitalist order. Liberal capitalist democracy prioritizes corporate lobbying governs democratic decision-making because corporates are needed for political funding and they can overturn elections. Example is that the government prioritizes mining activity at the cost of the environment. Elected representatives that have to pass these bills are not experts or scientists, they are political careerists. The agendas that they communicate and sell to the public will always be populist ones. Thank you.
Right.
Rochelle, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. So Zainab, having said what you said, could you throw some light on examples or cases where democracy isn't present in the world, and weave them into similar arguments that you've presented?
Okay, so
rephrase my question. If you've understood, kindly go ahead.
A country where there's no democracy, but in climate change is being addressed.
Yes, that's right. That's a better phrase. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so the problem is that even if currently we live in a global capitalist world, right? So the capitalism isn't something that's limited to certain country or to the USA or to India. It's a global phenomenon that's happening right now due to modernization and due to Western sort of liberalism and capitalism being promoted, right? So right now there might not be any country that propagates or addresses climate change without democracy. But they also don't do it with democracy. That's the point, right? That if we replace the climate policies or environmental policies with kind of remove them from within the ambit of within the ambit of democracy, it'll be easier to address these policies because then they can be handed over to experts or to scientists or to people who know what they're talking about. For example, in India,
what elected governments do is that they don't talk about the real issues, or about they throw words around like ozone layer and global warming and Swachh Bharat and local for vocal and environment and all of that, but they don't really understand that it's a global issue that requires specific actions against industrial kind of capitalist economic development, right? And that can only be addressed when climate crisis itself can be removed from within the ambit of democracy and addressed as an issue that is not debatable by profitable profit oriented corporates, or even individual people who don't see it as an immediate problem or an urgent issue. You have a follow-up question to what I just said?
No, that will be fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Manish Kumar Jha from IMS Law College, Noida, who's going to speak against the motion. And Deepa Sahi will be the jury member to ask him a question once he's finished. Over to you, Manish.
Ma'am, I'm audible. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, both.
In school, I learned that this earth is my mother. So I planted a tree each time I took a flight. I have been commuting to my college on a bicycle since last 3 years. I turn my vehicle off on red lights. I don't let anyone smoke in a public place. Well, call it my compassion. But protecting the environment is my fundamental duty under Article 51A of the world's largest democratic constitution, which you won't find in a despotic regime. And therefore, in Climate Change Performance Index 2020, the top 2 nations, Sweden and Denmark, are democratic nations. Even India ranks under 10, and among the bottom 5 nations are the 4 despotic regimes. In democracy, people can change the government, people can challenge the government. And therefore, right from the Chipko movement of 1973, which compelled the then PM Mrs. Indira Gandhi to ban the deforestation in Himalayan forests of Uttarakhand for next 15 years, to the most recent Chipko movement of just day before yesterday, led by Ridhima Pandey in Dehradun against the felling of trees for the expansion of Jolly Grant Airport in Dehradun. And even you don't require a group of citizens. Even a single citizen can shake the system and save the environment by means of public interest litigations in Supreme Court or High Courts, which was eventually exercised by a mere law student of Lloyd College in RA Forest to save RA Forest, and by the most recently by a leading environment lawyer to counter the stubble burning issue in northern Indian states. Well, come to the solutions. I would pick up from where I started this debate, forming human chains around the water bodies to prevent immersion of idols every Ganesh Mahotsav, every Durga Puja. Number 2, preferring e-rickshaws over auto rickshaws. Number 3, watering the overlooked plants from the same water that we use to quench our thirst. And the government should cap the dimensions of road widening projects in hilly areas, as Supreme Court recently did in the Char Dham case, to 5.5 meters. And the next, government should come up with a lucrative loan subsidies policies. You want a housing loan subsidy? Well, promises that there'll be 25 yards of green cover around.
Okay, you've been muted now. And Deepa, could you please ask?
Hi, Manish. Great argument. You put the entire onus, I think, on the individual, right? My question to you is, in a country like India, where everybody, the majority of people have been so poor so long, and now that the economies are growing, how do you motivate people not to be aspirational and get that extra car? And how do you change their habits? For example, I was told that eating rice is not a environmentally friendly activity because it uses too much water. How will you change these kind of ingrained habits and desires in a huge mass of people? Because simple advertising can't do it. What would you do? Because if, according to you, the entire onus would be on the person.
Yes, Manish. Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Now go on.
So, ma'am, few things I have already been doing. Like in my college, I started going by bicycle in my first year, and people just they were making mockery of me. But 1 year later, I see that there are 10 more bicycles standing there. This is the system. This is how we can change their mentality. This is how Ridhima Pandey is doing. She is gathering all the youths together and then taking a step. Simply advertising won't do. I agree very much with you. I would take them. Suppose there is Durga Puja in my village now. I would take them. I would form a human chain with them on the Visarjan day, and I would prevent the emotion of idols. So things like these, when they are involved in such things, and they know that what are the repercussions if we don't get involved, then the people will ultimately get involved. And I mean, I think this problem can be addressed. Thank you.
I like your optimism. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sania Rizwan from Lady Shri Ram College for Women in Delhi, and she'll be speaking for the motion, and the jurist will be Sudhir Mishra, who will be asking her a question once she's done. Over to you, Sania.
Audible?
You're audible, but are you visible?
Is this my video is on?
Okay, can't see you.
Can you see me now?
I can't see you, but maybe you can start speaking and let's see.
Oh, okay. So good evening, everyone. I'll be speaking for the motion. I'm Sania, and I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Democracies depend on majorities, and majority views are influenced by those who control information and media. Today, the industrial classes, and they ensure that the dominant narrative around development and progress remains one in their favor. This inherently anti-climate, pro-profit-making narrative is the developmental model that democracies strive to achieve and democratic masses appraise. If I prove both these things to you, I fulfill my burden. All the examples my opponent talked about, these conventions like the UNFCCC or the Indian environmental policy see climate and development as two opposing forces that have to find a middle ground, climate never taking precedence over a changeable concept like development. This middle ground also works for the average democratic voter because they are not able to foresee the future destruction of climate change. They're in a world that gatekeeps everything with money. They want these jobs for their minimal survival. So they will always choose leaders who talk about job-giving factories and industries over someone who's protecting landmass because they do not have an emotional incentive to talk about an alternate developmental model. But if everything depends on vote bank politics, then why can't climate activists become one? Because who are the people primarily affected and doing this advocacy and getting affected by Assam flood, drying lands, rising water levels? It's people from the Adivasi communities, farmers, in Indian context, Northeast Indians. It's not just their activism that is suppressed, but the very identity that they have repressed by state agencies, police brutality, and media because they question the dominant narrative of what progress is. Furthermore, politicians are not winning elections because they're doing good work. It's the promotional strategies that ensure their image is molded in a manner that people believe in their apparent credibility. This PR system requires advertising that comes from capitalist classes, and it transforms into socio-economic zones at tribal lands, cutting labor laws and cutting taxes. If our development democracy follows the anti-climate, and those who are affected by climate atrocities are silenced by national politics, he is inadequate to deal with this issue. Thank
you. Sudhir, you could ask your question, please.
Sir, you're muted. I can't see. Sir, you're...
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, Sania, you spoke about finding a middle ground.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think we lost her.
Yes, sir, I can.
You can?
No, I can hear you.
Great. So I want to ask you,
really
if you have an election in your area and the local candidate comes to you and he says, Sania, vote for me. What are the 3 things you will ask him on environmental balancing in your area? Because for me, climate change is a local event. Climate change is local, like picking up the plastic, cleaning it, not doing anything which wastes water or sewage. So what will you ask your favorite political candidate? What will be your aspiration? Three liners I want from you.
Okay, Sir, that exactly is my point, right? I want it to be local, which is why I want this power that is with this local leader. If this local leader is actually a climate activist, then I want this power to be more important and he to be given that power by positive discrimination. Like if they are from an indigenous community or they are from Adivasi community, I want this power to be with them. Only the thing is majority will not vote for them. So, but like to answer your question, three things that I will ask them. First of all, what is the idea of development for them? And this idea of development should be inclusive. It should include people and people's identity, because I think that is rooted with climate politics. I think tribal identities are what is rooted with climate politics. Second, I'll ask them if they're ready to share their legislative power and hear the opinions of people from Adivasi communities, from farmers. If farmer suicide is something that they do connect to climate change. But thirdly, I think I will ask them if international global dominance more important to them, or is an inclusive development within their area important to them, because I think that would talk a lot about their local priorities.
Okay, I want to ask you one more thing, Sanya.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever met Shankar Mahadevan?
No, sir, I haven't met him.
Because he sings so fast.
Oh, okay, I got it now.
No, it's okay.
I hope
Thank
you
you.
were able to get what I was talking
No,
about.
I was able to get it. It took me 30 years, but I'm finally able to understand. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the final debater of today's competition is Rumana C. Abdul Jabbar from the Government TD Medical College, Alappuzha, Kerala. And the jury member will be questioning Rumana will be Rushal once Rumana is done. Over to you, Rumana.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I stand against the motion that democratic politics is inadequate to address climate change because 1. Government has to prioritize people's interests and there's an opposition which keeps government policies on check. Second, there is press freedom and freedom of expression. This makes public decision-making better informed and there is room for proper discussion so that panicked policy responses are not created which may undermine the long-term goals. A study by Batig and Berno 2009 stated that the political commitment to climate change was highly positive in democracies. This is supported by the fact that countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, all top the list of countries for best climate change policies. Now, in India itself, there are several instances where government heard people's voices. For example, Silent Valley movement in 1970s in Kerala against Hydel Power Project and the Pachmada resistance against Coca-Cola all showed the battle at the grassroots levels and displayed how the public, the local self-government bodies and judiciary together prevented the overexploitation of resources. Now, in our country, we even have national green tribunals set aside for environmental cases alone. Last year, in our country across different cities, there was peaceful protest guided by the action of Greta Thunberg and our very own Lucipriya Kangijam to sound the alarm of climate change, which had a positive impact. At the same time, a 17-year-old climate activist was arrested in China, an authoritarian country, last month for the same. Now, in Delhi, we have set up smoke towers to tackle air pollution, and UNEP has taken partnership with Indian company to promote renewable resources, energy resources in our country. So I would like to conclude by saying that democracy has the ability to, democratic politics has the ability to adapt to the challenges they encounter. Rise in public awareness, education, including the groups affected directly along with relevant NGOs.
Yes, Rushal, you could please ask your question.
Right, she's from Alappuzha, not Alappuzha.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Thank you for correcting.
No. But that's well said. Rumana, what I would like to ask you is, what would you do? What would you suggest to the government, since you've spoken against the motion, to embrace this problem a little bit more than what already has, probably?
Sir, once more, please. I think it's the connection problem. The volume is low.
Sure. I'll try and repeat my question.
Okay, sir.
So if you sort of said against the motion, what do you think the government should do to embrace or to do a little bit more to solve this problem of climate change?
Okay, sir. The government must follow the renewable energy resources, use of renewable energy resources, so that the fossil fuel and the greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. Like I mentioned, UNEP has tied a partnership with Renew Power company so that more solar panels are used and more renewable source of energy is used. Another thing is that the government should implement the proper education regarding the climate change. The students, the youth should be knowing more about it. Even in protest, even though youth are coming forward, sometimes the parents are not actually knowing about the main problem the climate change can cause. So I think it should be implemented in the education, not just theoretically, practically. And green good deeds is a very good example that each one of us should follow. Avoid the use of plastics, waste burning and all should be avoided. Proper waste management is another step that we can do at an individual level. All this should be implemented and made compulsory from the government so that people can follow it. I think these measures can help at the central level and the local bodies and at the individual level.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now all the 12 participants have spoken, and it's the time for the judges to get busy with the marking, while the participants I know will be sitting on tenterhooks waiting to hear the results, but it's a bit of time to relax, and maybe you should watch the Daring Debates video being played.
Hi, my name is Richard. I'm the Director of Programs here at the American Center in New Delhi. We're delighted to be working today with Difficult Dialogues to bring this debate.
It's a part of me, Daring Debates, and I'm one of those who have dared to debate the patriarchy, the construct that we live in.
As lawyers pleading their cases and not by the theme as suggested.
When I entered the gender studies classroom, what I was told was the first thing, that masculinity and femininity are inherent traits in all of us, which explains a lot. Then I sit with my legs wide open in my house and my mother never fails to point out. She tells me you're being masculine. She tells me this will not do good with your husband.
Do you think students in private schools will become pleasant, or do you think students in government schools will become pleasant?
Students from both domains are able to handle pressure. In private, I think it's more because they have an added burden of homework, extracurricular activities and other stuff.
Only bookish and theoretical knowledge is no longer enough to put you ahead of the competition. And private institutions are willing to go that extra mile for
you. I was just so really impressed and overwhelmed by the depth and clarity of your understanding.
The power of film and storytelling can't be underestimated to create change, but the challenge is big.
Fundamentally believe that film has a hugely important role to play in helping people understand and engage and be inspired to act about the huge environmental challenges that are facing our planet.
These pioneers already have the answers that we need.
Conservationists and local people have shown just what a difference can be made when we work together.
The team has therefore found a sustainable, groundbreaking design solution, one that can be retrofitted easily at a low cost and adapted to other regions around the globe.
Fair Trade has worked so hard for the last 20 years to create a...
Welcome back. And now you've watched the films. I know you're feeling anxious about the results, but let's be a little comfortable and a little more patient. And as you know, you'll have expressed your passion with full gusto today. And as I would like to say that, our generation can be the facilitators of change, but you are the change that will make the change. And I'd like to speak to the jury members. Maybe it'll interest you also as to what they thought of today's debate. Deepa, would you like to say what you felt after hearing all these brilliant 12 speakers?
Yeah, I am extremely hopeful because I'm completely delighted with the level of political awareness and, related awareness. Poise leave aside. I mean, that was the confidence was amazing, but just the depth of thought. I feel our country is in good hands in the future, because if this is the level of thinking, then fantastic. Very, very proud of all of you. You have thought through things. You have linked it across the board. You've connected it to larger politics, the economics, the individuals, everything. It's you're on the right track.
That's so positive to hear.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Sudhir Mishra, would you like to give your views?
Deepaji,
so you're a crusader, apart from being just a lawyer.
Deepaji is my inspiration on this, because I was telling few of my friends yesterday that I'm in a jury with her. And one of them is the ambassador of a very important country. All of us used to stay in a room in Lajpat Nagar. And we had gone to see one movie of her. I think Maya Memsa we had gone to see together, and we had to buy in black. So I told this guy that I have to be in a jury. He's an ambassador of a country. He said, "Photo bhejo, tab dekhenge." So I had to him. So I tell you, dreams do come true when you meet people of. I have the privilege of representing CINTA now in various forums, and I represent Z on many platforms. And what I have realized, and what I want to say to all of you, one is that, of course, your passion, your intellect, your way to drive your argument is phenomenal. I will only like to say one addition, and few of you who come from diverse backgrounds, so diverse as medical, which is today the toast of our life, because I represent a lot of hospitals, and they tell us that nobody ever thought that we are so useful for society. It was just few years back when dengue was a huge issue in Delhi, they used to say that hang the doctors. So what I'll say, there is a complete change of perception, but important part is that when you do a debate, ultimately you have to find and I'm sure Deepaji will surely say one line or two line about it. You need to find your own way of delivering your debate. I'm almost nearing saying that have your own style developed. This is very, very critical. There were few of you who had a very, very imaginative style of talking. So always go with that. And the second thing, be the listener. Always think that whatever you are speaking, even if you have great argument, great points, but if you are not rehearsing in a manner where you are actually telling the mirror, are you listening to me? Are you understanding me? Then all your good work, all your good thoughts will come in action. Because I remember the only thing which you have to be worried about is that are you being heard properly? And that will happen when you go and speak before the mirror and come back prepared so that we can hear you better. So that's the only suggestion which I have.
Rushal, would you like to give your views?
Yeah, sure. I think, like Deepaji pointed out, although we don't have probably the breadth of the country, the length of the country at least seems, very well articulated points. I think these are two big behemoths that we have put together in a debate: is democracy and a problem like climate change, which has got imagination of all kinds of people, all from across the society, artists, and writers, and philosophers to policymakers, and the law on the other spectrum with Sudhir Mishra. So I think these are difficult challenges to take on and to articulate about for and against. I think the participants have done exceedingly well to make such poignant arguments and make their points very well known. And I think they're on the ball with many of these suggestions and the grasp of the problem itself. And the least that everybody can do is look look at our own selves and individual action. I think that also has been covered. So I think this has been a very well executed and articulated session, and I sort of extend my heartiest congratulations to everybody involved. It's been really cool.
Thank you. And well, the moment is here. We have the results, but before I announce the results, just hold on a little bit more. I'd like to thank the three very eminent and a very responsive jury members, the audience, and of course, the fantastic debaters. And Serena Narula, the founder of GSFA, TVE, and Difficult Dialogues, who made all this possible. And I'd also like to thank May Simlai, who's the chairperson of GSFA TVE. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Lloyd Law College, Director Professor Tasneem, Professor Avantika, Vaibhav, Anvesha, Vartika, and all the volunteers. And the Indira Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute, Professor KV Bharati, Gayatri, and all the volunteers. And of course, Law Octopus, and definitely the Daring Debates team, which have worked very hard. Okay, now is the time. As you know, there'll be two winners, one from for the motion and one from against the motion. So from for the motion, the winner this year of the Indian chapter is Gaurang Narayan of the Indira Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute, Puducherry. Please unmute yourselves and give him a big cheer and a good clap.
Can I say something?
Go, Gaurang.
Wait on. The second winner, who is against the motion, is Yash Gupta from the Armed Forces Medical College, Pune. Give her a hearty congratulations clap.
Thank you so much.
I hope
Thank you all so much.
Very excited. Now get prepared for the finale. And all you, the rest of the 10 speakers, you were equally competitive. Just one day, a different thing. You'll be back again, but keep your passion alive. And before we go, I'd like to request everybody and remind everybody that you must register for the annual event from the 16th of November to the 20th of November. And it's going to be fantastic 5 days of captivating online films, dialogues, and of course the grand finale, which is a global finale of the Daring Debates. And also it'll be the 9th GSFA Film Awards being given. So it should be interesting. Now, Gaurang, would you like to say a few words before you go and how excited you are in all your excitement?
I'm sorry for this background. There's a power cut in my area.
Never mind.
There's a power cut in my area, so I'm sorry for this dark background. I'd like to personally thank Difficult Dialogues for hosting this up. I've been in touch with Difficult Dialogues for quite some time. Thank you so much, jury members, and thank you, co-participants. So thank you all. I am excited. Let's see. Keeping fingers crossed. Thank you all so much.
Can I speak for a second?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to tell the others who have not got these awards that you were really fantastic, and don't go by winning and losing. Keep to the commitment of what you have said, and you had some sensationally good points. From my field, I can tell you that some of the greatest actors and filmmakers have made duds in the beginning, but they've turned out top of the game later. So stick to your brilliant minds and don't go by winning and losing. Thank you.
Very well put. Yash, would you like to say something?
I would like to thank, I'm very honored to have this opportunity to speak on such a great platform. And I think all of the debaters here put in a lot of effort, and I'm honored to win this because everyone else was so good in themselves.
Yeah.
And thank you for the jury
for
choosing me.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Sudhir, would you like to say something?
No, I want to echo what Deepaji said, that each one of them was brilliant. Each one of them will go and win many debates after this. and they should just take it as one step at a time.
True. Vishal?
And thank you, Sudhir, for making me feel so good.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Vishal, you want to say anything?
Not in particular, just all the best to the both the winners in their next step and the next journey, and the others also just keep at it. Thank you to you too, the moderator.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot,
Nabhanita.
everybody. And see
Thank
you
you,
at
Nabhanita.
the finals. Thank you, Seema.
Thank you, Seema.
See you
Thank
at the
everybody.
Thank you,
finals.
Seema.
Nalini.
Nabhanita.
Pleasure is all ours.